Hey team, and welcome to another video of our Astrological Magical Elections video series. Today we are going to talk about our magical election opportunities between the Aries Full Moon on October 20th until the Scorpio New Moon on November 4th. Today I'm joined by my lovely co-host, Lee, here sleeping on the job. So, it's been kind of crazy lately, astrologically speaking, and that has definitely impacted the kind of electional talismanic opportunities that we have to work with. We had to deal with Jupiter and Saturn being retrograde for a while, as well as Mercury being retrograde, and Mars being combusted by the Sun, which really severely restricted the times that were available to us for any sort of astrological talisman. So we really haven't had a whole lot to do, in the recent past. But thankfully, that time has now come to an end, as now until I think just before Christmas, all 7 of the traditional planets are direct. So we don't have to really worry about retrograde motions, knocking planets out of the running for things that we can turn to for magical purposes, which is really great. So I said back in a video before that once all the planets were direct, we were going to make like so many talismans. And we are. We're going to make, even in this video, we have several to talk about. So we're going to go ahead and get started. We're going to start with Australia, who doesn't have a whole lot to work with, unfortunately, but there are some kind of nuggets here that are worth digging into. So our first electional opportunity is going to be for October 31st at around 2:30 in the morning. This chart here is set for 2:27, and this is going to be an opportunity for a Regulus fixed star talisman. So, and this is Australia is the only one who gets this, so they're lucky, I guess, in this respect, even though they did not have the most electional opportunities to pick up. They do have this one very unique and very, very fortunate one. Leo is a fixed star in the constellation of Regulus, and it's no. Regulus is a fixed star in the constellation of Leo, and it's associated with boldness, with courage, with vitality, with strength, and with countering physical and mental symptoms of melancholy. So overcoming depression, overcoming the blues, the being stuck in the rut kind of feelings, overcoming even those physical symptoms of melancholy like hardness and slow bodily processes. Regulus can help us in a little bit of a medical sense, more specifically for curing melancholic temperament, can help us overcome that. So taking a look at our chart here, we have the moon applying to the conjunction of Regulus, which is at 0 degrees Virgo in the tropical zodiac, and at this time she is applying a really close sextile to Mars. And Regulus is of the nature of Jupiter and Mars, so you want the moon to be able to apply to one of those two planets immediately while also applying to the star. So this chart is really good. We have the moon unafflicted. We just have the sextile with Mars. The ascendant is unafflicted. We don't really have anything to worry about. But kind of one thing that I want to touch on is that you need to make sure that if you're going to go through with this election, to use the Virgo ascendant and not the Leo ascendant, because we have the Virgo ascendant, then we're pointing to Mercury here as the ruler of the first house. That was terrible. Then we're pointing to Mercury here as ruler of the first house. Got to be careful around the circle. Who is right now unafflicted at 20 degrees Libra, a little bit too far from the conjunction of Mars to worry about, and not close really to the square of Saturn. So Mercury's doing pretty well, just kind of chilling out in Libra by itself. But if you were to use the Leo ascendant, then that would point to the Sun as the ruler of the first house. And the Sun is not doing so well. As you can see, it's close to the conjunction of Mars, and it's almost exactly square Saturn in this chart, and we don't want that. We don't want that part to be drawn in. So if you're going to use the Regulus selection, make sure that you do after the ascendant moves into Virgo. Don't get the Leo ascendant. That's bad news. At the same time, sort of like a lesser second billing kind of situation, this chart is also a good chart for a 12th Lunar Mansion talisman. The 12th Lunar Mansion being one that is about separations, cutting off things that no longer serve us, kind of fighting with or overcoming internal aspects of ourselves that are no longer, that are not positive, maybe have never been positive, but things that we have struggled with for some time. It can be used to push other people away, to push away situations or habits that no longer are helpful to us. The 12th Lunar Mansion is very much about pruning things. I guess technically it's about fighting dragons, but whatever your dragon is, the 12th Lunar Mansion can help. So kind of like I said, it's like a second billing kind of situation, because the Regulus fixed star-ness, the chart being a better suit for a Regulus fixed star talisman, is more rare than just like a 12th Lunar Mansion talisman. So we probably want to lean more into the Regulus talisman, but maybe we don't need a Regulus talisman. Maybe you don't need those things. So the 12th Lunar Mansion can help you overcome you know, its own set of particular effects that Regulus doesn't exactly handle. Like, Regulus isn't really good for pushing away bad habits or like relationships that aren't useful for us anymore. Regulus can kind of like give us the courage to feel better about enforcing those boundaries, I guess. But it's really the 12th Lunar Mansion that's more about making those things happen. So here, kind of looking at it from this perspective, this sextile to Mars, wow. This sextile to Mars is more about like enforcing it with strength, because so we've talked a bit before in the past about the utilization of malefic and benefic planets in these kinds of contexts, where benefic planets can make the separation a little bit easier to handle, but might kind of draw it out a little bit longer than it needs to be, kind of like slowly peeling off that band-aid, which tends to be, you know, more painful. Whereas malefic planets tend to be more cut and dry, more like we're done with this, we're done, and more harsh in how they get the point across. So kind of, you know, balancing that, what you want the talisman to do, how you want the separation to be, that's really more the decision here. With this Mars, is going to be more, we're done, and it's over, kind of leaving, you know, a bad taste in everybody's mouth, potentially burning bridges, which might be absolutely fine with what you want. Alternatively, there is another 12th Lunar Mansion talisman at around 739 that you could potentially do, and this one is is a completely different flavor. You notice we have Venus now in the first house. The ruler of the first house is Jupiter here on the IC. The moon is on the midheaven in the 12th Lunar Mansion, and now she's applying the sextile to the sun. So like completely different flavor. Whereas the first one was much more martial, much more harsh, a little bit more malefic in how it wanted to do things. This one is a little bit more patient and a little bit more kind in how it wants to make that separation happen. So this is kind of like a really unique situation to be in Australia, to where if you are in a situation where you're ready for something to be done, whether that is like a relationship that's plaguing you, or like a person that's sticking around, or like a habit or whatever, you have kind of two different modes that you can choose from of how to be done with it. You have the earlier time, which is a bit more harsh, a bit more cold turkey in its handling of things, and you have this one, which is a little bit more like weaning off, that's a little bit more like weaning off the source. So whichever one more fits your personality, which more fits your situation, here you go. You got one of each. So our last electional opportunity for the Australian continent is going to be for November 4th at around 4:43 a.m. is what this chart is set for. And this is an opportunity for a 16th Lunar Mansion. The 16th Lunar Mansion is one that's primarily concerned with wealth, its accumulation, and the movement of it. And so we typically utilize it more in the waxing moon phase, right? Like that's where we're getting all the money and we're just like rolling around in it like Scrooge McDuck. But when we're talking about like a waning phase aspect of the 16th Lunar Mansion, we have to recognize another side of this growth and accumulation, and that is debt and lack thereof. So while the waxing moon is useful for the 16th Lunar Mansion, that's a better way to say that. So while the waxing flavor of the 16th Lunar Mansion is more about wealth and accumulation and gain, drawing things to you, the waning side of the 16th Lunar Mansion is more about paying back things that we have loaned to ourselves, or that we have borrowed from others. So this could be a really great electional opportunity to help somebody pay back debts, whether that is somebody who is struggling with mounting credit card debt, or just whatever, student loan debt, whatever the situation is, medical debt if you're in America. This could be a really great way to help start to pay that back, and maybe even start to reduce it. So this could be like another good talisman to pick up for maybe like refinancing one's home or car, or kind of like any situation where we can reduce the amount of money that we owe something. This could be a really great spirit to help pick up, to help us get that ball rolling, to help the things line up, to make that less of a chore than it should be, put less effort into accomplishing the same thing. So here in our election, we've got the moon in the 16th Lunar Mansion, barely hanging on to the ascendant here, according to the 5-degree rule. And here we're applying the conjunction with Mercury, who actually does rule the 8th house in this chart, which I thought was kind of cool, the 8th house being about debt, money owed, loans, things like that. But the reason why we have the ascendant in Scorpio and not like Libra to make the moon, more securely angular, you would say, is because I didn't want Mars in the first house not ruling it. You typically don't want a malefic planet in the first house at all, but especially when it comes to like money and loans and things like that, because Mars is a very like throw your money into the fire, just throw it, just set it on fire and let it go. That's more Mars' situation. It's not really a planet that is about like pacing and paying things back and being smart with money and stuff like that. So I didn't want that influence in the first house not also ruling the first house, because that just sounds kind of like destructive and mismatching. But putting Mars as ruler of the first in the first helps to kind of like tone it out a little bit more. So that's all that we have for the Australian continent. Moving on to the Western European and North Africa. Our first electional opportunity is going to be for the 27th of October at just before 6 in the morning. This is at 5:41, this chart here. And this is set for a 9th Lunar Mansion talisman. So the 9th Lunar Mansion is a little bit kind of cursy. That's the word I'm going to use. A lot of the mansions that are more attuned to like waning moon phases are cursy. It's just our job to kind of recontextualize or figure out how we can use them more productively without hurting other people necessarily, or ourselves. And the 9th Lunar Mansion, when we're working with it, its goal, its power, is when we're on the waxing moon phase, it's about spiritual protection, and about creating barriers to negative spiritual energy. Good stuff. When we're in the waning phase, we're more about banishing that same negative spiritual energy or its sources or originators. So when we're talking about the 9th Lunar Mansion in a waning phase, we're focused more on utilizing it as a tool for banishing, as an aid in banishing or getting rid of negative gunk that surrounds us, or people, or even people, probably more especially people that are not good for us, that are bad influences on us or drag us down. So if you are in a situation where you feel like you might use some of that, or you suspect that, the 9th Lunar Mansion is kind of a fun one in like kind of a sad way, really, because what tends to happen with it is that by making it, people around you kind of slowly start to fall off of your radar, if that makes sense. And so the 9th Lunar Mansion kind of creates this, like, I don't know, test or something, this atmosphere, I guess, where like the people or like the relationships or the things around you that are bringing you down, that are dragging you down to some extent, whether or not you're aware of it, just kind of like disappear out of your life. So it's kind of one of those things to where, like, ultimately it's supposed to be like a good thing, but it can also be kind of a sad thing as you kind of start to see its effects and like the things of the people that start to like slowly fall off or like lose contact with. So keep that in mind. But looking at our election chart here, we've got the moon in the 9th Lunar Mansion, a little bit distant from the midheaven than I like. The reason for that is because I wanted to keep Mars out of the first house, so I had to move this around. At this time, Moon is applying a square aspect to Mercury in the first, and I thought this was fine. Mercury's a little bit like destabilizing, so I thought it was a good kind of like cursed light, we'll say TM, cursed light planet to utilize. So like your more malefic planets like Mars and Saturn are usually more where you go for these kinds of like banishing, or the sun kind of things. But I thought that Mercury would be a good kind of like softer touch to it rather than like a full-on face punch. I thought Mercury would be good for that. And while this is happening, our ruler of the first house is Venus down here in Sagittarius. Venus is not afflicted by Mars or Saturn. She's actually got this nice supporting sextile from Jupiter, which I think is like kind of really nice for this kind of a situation, if only because it's like you still have this support to get through things while the 9th Lunar Mansion just kind of like slowly like picks people out of your friends list, out of your contact lists. Just delete. So our next electional opportunity for the Western European North African continent is going to be for October 31st at around 2:30 in the morning. This chart is set for 2:39. And this is going to be an opportunity for a 12th Lunar Mansion talisman. The 12th Lunar Mansion is one that is more focused on cutting out fighting like internal dragons. It's more about like cutting out bad habits or things in our lives that no longer serve us. So it's very similar to an extent to the 9th Lunar Mansion, except the 9th Lunar Mansion is more focused like specifically on active threats, we'll say, whereas the 12th Lunar Mansion is more focused on inner working, if that makes sense. So like the 9th Lunar Mansion you would use if there was something or somebody out there that you felt threatened by, that you felt was actively hurting you or trying to hurt you. The 12th Lunar Mansion is the call that's coming from inside the house, and it's me. I'm the one who is getting in my own way, and these are the ways that I think it's happening. Help me do this. This is like the quitting bad habits, helping come out of addictions, helping get out of codependent relationships or abusive relationships. more things like that. There is a little bit of overlap there with the 9th Lunar Mansion, especially when like other people are involved, but where the 12th Lunar Mansion is especially different or especially shines is with that more internal processes kind of thing, which the 9th Lunar Mansion doesn't really have any help with. So if you look at our chart here, we've got the moon on the ascendant in Virgo, and at this time she is applying this sextile with the sun, which is tremendously helpful, especially as we're kind of doing those more internal workings. The sun helps us to shed light, really kind of like lay our patterns out before us, and to help cleanse and kind of get rid of all the bad stuff that's holding us back, that's keeping us, holding on to these habits or people or things that is holding us back. The sun helps us identify what the situation is, why we're so like hooked into it, and you can't fight back, you can't get out of it until you understand why you're there in the first place, like what you're getting out of it. That's what the sun here helps us to identify. At this time, we've got the Virgo in the ascendant, which means that our ruler of the first house is Mercury here. Mercury is at 20 degrees Libra, a little far from the conjunction of Mars to have to worry about right now, and further still from the square of Saturn to have to worry about, but that time is a-coming, so we will keep our eye on that in future electional opportunities, of course. Our third and final electional opportunity for the Western European and North African continents are going to be for November 3rd at around 12:03, so like right afternoon. And this is going to be for an opportunity for the 16th Lunar Mansion Talisman. So I talked a bit about this in the Australian version, but I'll repeat it here for those who only watch their own section, which is totally fine. When we're working with the 16th Lunar Mansion, it is primarily one that is about like money, commerce, business, that kind of thing. And usually within the situation of like gain, like I'm getting all the money and we're going to roll around in it, which is great. Super fun if you can do that. But kind of like the image of the 16th Lunar Mansion is scales, right? Like the price to be paid, the price to be received. Those are kind of like the indicator stars that are involved here with this mansion. And so while we have the waxing phase, which is all about gain and accumulation, we also have the waning phase of the moon, which is about paying back debts and loss and things like that. So, because this is a waning moon, and we're going to utilize our 16th Lunar Mansion, this could be a great opportunity for individuals who are working towards paying off debts or loans, or kind of like reducing the amount of money that they owe their things. So if you are kind of struggling with any of those like debt situations, the 16th Lunar Mansion can be kind of like your credit repair service, I guess we'll say. This could also be a great talisman to utilize to help like negotiate like lower rates for things, because we're trying to reduce our amount owed. And that can happen in several different ways. It can be literally like a talisman that helps you get better at paying off debt, that gets you like extra money that you need to pay off debts. It can be a talisman, or it can just be a talisman that helps you like renegotiate financing rates, or interest rates on things. And that can be another way that you save money too. So keep that in mind if you are in a situation where that can be useful, or you're about to like make a big purchase and want to be able to like owe less on it. Here you go. Here's a thing for that. Looking at our chart here, we've got the moon conjoined the midheaven in the 16th Lunar Mansion, and at this time she's applying this trine to Jupiter in Aquarius, which is very good. At the same time, Jupiter's also our ruler of the first house down here in Aquarius in the second house, so we have that money theme. The moon is the ruler of the 8th money theme, and Jupiter's unafflicted by Saturn, not worry about Mars, is too far away to worry about. And we also have the very helpful Venus in the first house, Venus and Sagittarius in the first house. So we have, this chart has a little bit more like support in it than the Australian version did, which did not have Venus in the first house, for instance, or the application to Jupiter. So this one is like the softer version of that one, but still a really good one to help you kind of work through the process of paying things back. So that wraps up our Western European / North African electional opportunities. Now we're going to move into the North American continent. And so for North America, we have a number of charts, but most of them are things that we've already seen before. Our first electional opportunity for the North American continent during this lunation is going to be on October 26th, and this is like just after 11 p.m. This chart is set for 2308, and this is going to be that opportunity for the 9th Lunar Mansion Talisman. That 9th Lunar Mansion is one that is primarily about like spiritual protection, erecting spiritual barriers when we're in the waxing moon phase, but in the waning moon phase we're more like banishing. We're using it to get rid of and throw out like negative spiritual energy, negative spiritual gunk that we have accumulated for ourselves. And this is really a practice that everybody should get into, like regardless of if you're making a talisman for it. But just like general banishing and kind of like spiritual hygiene rituals are really great tools to utilize like all the time. But consider the Ninth Lunar Mansion like a supercharged version of it, or like a supercharging tool to help you to accomplish that. So kind of a different way to look about it. The Ninth Lunar Mansion is primarily used historically is primarily used to like curse people who are cursing you. That's the takeaway here. But we are not going to do that. We are going to be better than that, and we are going to utilize the Ninth Lunar Mansion to help drive away, of course, you know, those negative influences, especially if they're being pressed upon us. But it can also be used a little bit more mundanely as well for individuals who are feeling threatened by like an outside person, like another person. It doesn't have to be magical per se, but you know, if you're an individual who's feeling threatened by another person, of course it's famously very difficult to get like law enforcement to help threats and harassment, right? But the Ninth Lunar Mansion can kind of help take care of that where other more mundane systems may fail. So always kind of keep that in mind when working with the Ninth Lunar Mansion. So in our chart here, we have the Moon in the Ninth Lunar Mansion as the ruler of the first house. And at this time, she is applying this square to Mercury. And of course, Mercury is sort of like the cursed light planet, I say. So typically with these kinds of elections, if you're working on kind of like banishing and getting rid of things, you normally want to lean more into like the more malefic powers, right? It's kind of like a pest control talisman, except the pest is like the bad vibes. And so typically you would want to lean more into malefic planets like Mars or Saturn, but because the bad vibes in this instance can often come from people, I don't really like to lean into that because that tends to be a little harsh, though sometimes that is necessary or required or a good option. It isn't always, but Mercury is a really good secondary option because it's like, it's not forceful, it's like tricky, it's like, oh, their car doesn't work, or like it has like fun ways that it manifests with people that aren't like immediately like hurtful, right, or like dangerous, but it still works in a very interesting way. An alternative would be the Sun, whose like light powers, whose power of light is also very helpful for these kinds of things. But we're going to lean into Mercury here to help us out. The Moon, as the ruler of the first house, is not afflicted by Mars or Saturn, though we are starting to get close to this square of Mars, so this might be a little bit of a spicy banishing talisman. So keep that in mind, and please use responsibly. So our next electional opportunity for the North American continent is going to be for November 3rd at just after noon, and this is going to be for that 16th Lunar Mansion talisman. The 16th Lunar Mansion traditionally is associated with money, with wealth and gain during the waxing moon phase, and then with debts and loans in the waning moon phase. And since we are dealing with a waning moon phase, we're going to kind of lean more into that debt and loan aspect of it and kind of reducing the amount of money owed that we owe to other people or institutions. So modern day, we're all saddled with debt of different kinds, whether that's credit card debt, especially in North America. Oh, I can bring this home. I can bring this home a little bit more in ways that didn't make sense in other ones. Whether that's credit card debt, student loans debt, sorry, cat. Whether that's credit card debt, student loan debt, medical debt, mortgage, car loans, we're all burdened with debt, right? That's how this economy works. But with the 16th Lunar Mansion, we can help to sort of pay that back. Or you might be like me and like under serious amounts of cat debt. This is Bubbles, co-host Bubbles. She's very upset about being here today. She doesn't want to work, she says. She's looking at me crazy. Here, go see Lee. Smooth. So with the 16th Lunar Mansion in the waning moon phase, we focus more on reducing the amount of money that we owe to other people or institutions. So there are kind of two ways you can work with this, right? This can be like your credit repair service. On the one hand, it can be a way to create something to kind of get the ball rolling and paying off these different debts. Maybe something that you've struggled with in the past, it just kind of gets out of control, right? Then this can really help you kind of get those resources together and get a plan together to help you get this done. Or an alternative, if that's not really the way you want to work it, or if that's something that's not super applicable to you, you can also work it as a way to like reduce the amount of something. So like you're trying to make a big purchase, this can help you kind of like reduce interest rates on financing, or refinancing homes or car notes to get, you know, lower interest rates, end up owing less on it. Kind of that, like think of it more like that. And that's kind of how we're going to roll with this one. looking at our election chart, we have the moon here in the 16th Lunar Mansion, and she is applying this conjunction with Mercury in the 10th house. Mercury is all about commerce and like accounting, like keeping debts, keeping track of debts. Right now we've got Saturn as ruler of the first house down here in the second house, which is thematically appropriate. And we have Venus as on the ascendant here, helping to kind of like stabilize. That was bad. Helping to sort of stabilize and bring some good fortune, some of that benefic good fortune here to the first house, helping to strengthen it and bonify it, and so hopefully helping us to get more stuff going. Actually, no, I don't want to use this chart. Don't use this chart. That's bad, because what you've got is the Saturn Mars square. What you want to use instead is you want to use a chart like this, where I can just do this. We can just go back in time a little bit. So instead, set your chart for 1145, and then you'll have the moon conjoined Mercury here in the 10th house, applying to him. But now you'll have Jupiter as the ruler of the first house and the second. Jupiter's not afflicted by Mars or Saturn. Let's go with that. Venus is more securely in the first house, not on the ascendant. So let's do that instead. Let's do 1145 instead of 1202. So our final electional chart for the North American continent and for our video is going to be on November 1st at 10:50 a.m., so just before 11 o'clock, and this is going to be an opportunity for an Alkaid fixed star talisman. So Australia gets Regulus, North America gets Alkaid, Western Europe gets Buckus. And Alkaid is a really fun fixed star that I've been kind of digging a lot more into lately. Alkaid is a star that is primarily about like looking at our source text, it's primarily about like hunting, protection of hunters and travelers, and it's about dispelling poisons. So it can be really useful for like a number of different things. There is the hunting aspect of it, which can be, actually about hunting if that's a hobby or sport that you like to participate in, but it can be more like of a metaphor for hunting, hunting for a job, hunting for a place to stay, like looking for, something, hunting for a relationship, hunting for like the one. So Alkaid has a lot of ways it can work in kind of like how we think about things. It's really more about like goal attainment is how I think about it. Or like success in a search for something is really where Alkaid shines. Another way that Alkaid shines is in the medical aspect, especially when it comes to the empowering of medicines. Alkaid is a star that is historically associated with healing and medicine making. And in the Hermes texts, it's associated with dispelling poisons. And this is something that can be used a couple different ways. I like to use it to help reduce the side effects of medicines, especially those that are kind of like known for having bad side effects. It can also be used for people overcoming certain illnesses, like food poisoning, like those kinds of things. Alkaid is also useful for help against like robbers, so kind of like helps to protect assets or protect a home, and against... oh crap. Oh, and Alkaid also dispels enchantments. So we're really kind of digging into like the magical protection vibe this 2 weeks, which is great. So Alkaid is like really, really multi-purpose. I really like Alkaid as a star. I think it's a really important one, a really good one. So it's definitely something to recommend a lot. And in our election chart here, we have the moon applying to the conjunction of Alkaid, which is now on the ascent, on the midheaven, while she is applying the square to Venus. And Alkaid is a star that is said to be of the nature of Venus and the moon. So having the moon apply to Venus is super good in Alkaid elections. We don't necessarily need them because the moon is one of the planets that the stars have the nature of, so she can kind of do the job herself as long as she's applying to like anybody who's decently situated in a chart. But Venus makes it even better, while at the same time our ruler of the first house is Jupiter down here in the third, and Jupiter's not afflicted by Mars or Saturn, not combust the sun. Jupiter's doing well. So this is just a really great fixed star talisman chart to pick up. Alkaid is super, super duper useful, and has a lot going on for her. So definitely recommend it if you are at all in need for it. But all right, those are all of the electional opportunities that I have to share with you for these 2 weeks. We kind of have a lot going on after, like, what, 2-ish lunations where we really didn't have anything to talk about, either like nothing at all or not a lot. So it's good to kind of be back having things to talk about, and to point out to you guys, to help you guys work on some stuff. So we'll kind of continue this trajectory as the planets continue to be direct, and we'll have to worry a little bit about Venus's retrograde in December, but hopefully we're just like clear skies and the heavens are much calmed, is what we're looking at here, and hopefully that keeps up for a little bit. But everybody take care, and I will see you all again on the Scorpio New Moon.